Good morning. That's better. That's better. Thank you so much for coming. This is awesome. I'm so thrilled. This is our first ever Pathways and Ladders seminar with some fabulous panelists here today that are going to introduce themselves in just a moment. So thank you for joining us. My name is Meaghan O'Shea. I am the VP of Marketing and Communications for Farmers Restaurant Group. If you have an agenda in front of you, I am not Ashley Green. She is a fabulous, she's been with us for 10 years. She's the general manager of this store, and she had to attend to her family this morning. So we're like, you know what? Take care of what you gotta take care of. We're gonna figure it out. We got your back, and here I am. So bear with me. Learned that in midnight last night. But we're gonna just go down the line. If each of you could introduce yourself, kind of tell us what your role is and how you got into it, and then we'll go from there.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Kathleen Hollinger. I am the CEO of the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan, Washington, which is the trade association here in DC, Virginia, and Maryland, representing food service. So representing restaurant owners and operators like this great restaurant, Riss, and her great restaurant, and maybe many of you in the room, I don't know, as well as food and beverage providers, and really anyone who supports the industry, supports a restaurant or a chef. And how did I get into this role? I mean, that's probably a longer story that I can share with drinks, but I will say that I've been in this market for almost 30 years, and I'm more of a market knowledge individual where I've represented many industries. I represented cable, film and television. I worked for a mayor, for some council members. So it really was more of my market knowledge and kind of evolving into this role representing probably the greatest industry in the world.
Good morning. My name is Tiffany Gary. I represent two places. So I'm the concierge at the Ritz-Carlton, Washington, D.C., and I'm also the vice president of the Washington Area Concierge Association. So I started out in restaurants, of course. I was a restaurant trainer for 2 years for a restaurant-based chain based out of Lubbock, Texas called Abuelos. And then that was a whirlwind. I did store openings. That's an experience. It's very fun though. I love doing openings. When I decided to move back to Washington, D.C., I interviewed at a hotel because oddly enough, my roommates both worked at Hilton's. And they were like, we absolutely see you working at a hotel. And I was like, really? So when I came back to D.C., I started out as a front desk agent for Marriott Wardman Park. I did that. I became a rooms controller. Fell into concierge totally by accident. When I was with the Weston brand, the HR representative laughed at me my whole interview, and she was like, you can have that phone operator position if you like, but you need to be in front of people. And I was like, really? I don't want to do front desk. And she was like, have you thought about being a concierge? And I was like, no. She was like, that's what we're going to do. So it was a rocky first year. I was just like, what is happening? These people are so demanding. So that's how I kind of figured out, like, you have to cultivate relationships, you know? So that's kind of catapulted me into the association, because without them, I would be still that shaky first year concierge. So that's how I became all of this now.
Good morning, my name is Laura Hayes. I'm the food editor at Washington City Paper. I've had that job for 3 years. My background's in broadcast journalism. I started with television, news, writing, and production. Then took a lifetime out in Japan for almost 3 years, where I taught English and farmed rice. And the one thing I think that both journalism and the hospitality industry have in common is whatever previous experience you've had, you can use it. This is like my third career. My beat is a little bit different than some other food writers. So I'm not writing reviews. I'm usually not telling you what's good and what's bad. I have the honor of kind of talking about all the different things food touches, from labor and immigration to addiction and mental health and urban agriculture. So it's great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katharine. I'm the marketing and PR at the Conrad, Washington, D.C. right down the street. It's Hilton property, so Tiffany, if you ever want to come back to Hilton, just come back. So I have a little bit of a roundabout way of getting to where I am now. I started my career as a journalist. I actually covered food and wine in New York. And then I moved into marketing, specifically digital marketing, and that took me to a number of different areas. Living Social, as I'm sure some people have touched in this room, and another startup in the sort of travel industry, which touched on hotels, and then to corporate finance, and now I found myself back in the hospitality industry at the Conrad, and it's absolutely fantastic. So.
Thank you. And so we kind of chose this panel to show like the diversity of all the different roles that can be in the hospitality industry. It's not just operations. There's so much more beyond the four walls that you can do. And so that was done with intent. I'm being told to hold the mic closer to my face so you can hear me. And so we'll have some time for questions at the end, but just so we get a gauge of like who's in the room, how many people are currently in or involved with the industry right now? Okay, awesome. How many people are wanting to get into the industry? Yes, we see you. It's great. And you, great. So we'll kind of dive in. So most of the people here are in the industry, so we're talking to our fellow. I guess anyone can jump into this first question first, but why should women kind of like go into the food and hospitality industry? It's kind of known, not to play into stereotypes, it's like kind of like a guy's game. It's not. And so like, how did you break through? What kind of drew you in? How do you see, especially I think in DC, this town over the past 10 years has really evolved drastically in this hospitality, food, beverage world in the city. And so like kind of what's your take on like how women have infiltrated that and like kind of moved the needle for the better?
So the best way for me was I never accepted no. I just don't. I need to understand why you're telling me no, so that way I can work around the next time I actually hear you tell me no again. And then I've always surrounded myself around people that challenge me. So that's been my main strength and my success in this industry is, you know, you have to surround yourself around people that one, support you, and two, challenge you. Because without that, you just get comfortable. And DC is very fast paced now. Like I call us the mini New York because it's just like a restaurant is popping up everywhere now, and hotels are being built everywhere now, and you have to stay relevant. You have to stay with the times. You have to know your stuff. So that's basically what I can offer you.
I was gonna say, I think to, completely agree with you, Tiffany, but also I think the hospitality industry is primed for women because it takes a combination of skill sets, creativity, patience, multitasking, and also just real care of people. I mean, it's hospitality. And so when you meet other people and other women in the industry, you have an immediate bond. I'm sure everyone here has felt that, which is just like, it goes beyond just work. It comes into a familial type of feel. So for me personally, when I decided to make the move from corporate finance, which is not like that, I immediately looked back to the hospitality industry because that's a place that I was comfortable with and people that I knew and at least knew those personality types. So I think that it's primed for women, and it's an incredible industry for women to go into and start really taking leadership roles. But yeah, that's fine.
So I wrote a column a couple weeks ago where I interviewed female food entrepreneurs in DC, and I went in with expecting very bad news because the topic was whether women experience something different when they go and try to access capital to get their restaurant off the ground or get their food business started. This story was inspired by an event I went to in New York where a chef from Portland, Oregon told a story about how she started a Kickstarter campaign, as a lot of people do these days, to try to get her across the finish line in terms of funding. And as soon as it published, a male restaurateur texted her and said, "Kickstarters are for kids with cancer. You should be able to open a restaurant on your own." So I was like, what's happening in DC? So I reached out to people like Bettina Stern of Chaya and Sarah Colonna of Supergirl, and I was actually pleasantly surprised when it came to attracting investors. They found that people are actually looking for women to invest in and looking for minority-owned businesses to invest in, and the needles kind of swung the other way. It was a little different when we started talking about banks. There are some people, the founders of Denizens felt some pushback that they suspected was gender related when they went to the bank to get their second brewery open. But I just think that people are looking for us to stand up and create more pipeline ownership and things like that.
So I'm gonna only speak to the why there's opportunity for women and why it could be a good fit. My dear friend Riss Lacoste and I were just talking about this as I barely got here by 8 a.m. this morning. But we were talking about how it depends what lens you're looking through, right? So Riss, she runs her own restaurant, chef by trade, amazing leader in our community. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard depending on your track. But the beauty, the flip side, is that it is an industry with tremendous opportunity. So you can come in, anyone, an individual, with light skills or previous skills and apply it to any facet of a job in hospitality. Whether you want to go more into the business of hospitality, like what Nikki does with Nikki Nellis with her company. It's like a whole morning of plugging other people. But what I love about it is you as a woman can decide, because it is still one of the very, very few jobs that allows for flexibility. So what you put in, you will get out. And if you as a female need a certain level of flexibility, you can get it. And you also have the ability to earn significant income. But the other piece that I think is so great is you can decide as a woman, do you want to be an individual contributor, part of a team that is picking a role that is more of an individual contributor role, or do you want to be a leader? And do you want to go into management? And you have the opportunity to do both. So I strongly encourage it. I have a whole team of female leads on my own RMW staff. And I think it works because we give the cover that we all need for one another, depending on where people are in their lives. But there is something really special and magical about female bosses, I think. And I will say that my team is that. And one last thing, in terms of opportunity, we as an industry, we know that we want to bring more women into our industry. So we have people specifically on our board, like Riss, again, who they are thinking about how are we getting more female voices around the table to ensure that they are a part of conversations that Laura is having or that Laura is writing about, because it is so indicative of what we are seeing in this market. That was really long, but opportunity is key.
Wonderful answers. And you're welcome to talk as long as you want. No time limit. And so, kind of building off of that, obviously, if we could all go kind of like back in time, we all have lessons learned. We all have things saying like, hindsight's 20/20. That's saying that we could go back in time and I might have done that differently. I might have handled that differently. I might have responded differently. Maybe I would have asked a different question or taken a different path. Like, if you could go back, because we're all well established into our careers now, if you could go back to your younger self, what's one or two things that you might have changed, or a situation you might have handled differently, or something that you've learned now? Like, I know for myself, the way I handle, you said, I don't accept the word no, right? So like, the way I approach that now is probably really different than how I approached it when I was 23. But like, what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now through your experience? It's a loaded question, I know.
Nothing,
Katharine,
it was
you're up.
perfect. No, it's a great question, because I think that, we all have learnings every single day. I think for me it was a lot of, and this is kind of dovetailing into another question I know we had, but it's a lot of kind of having self-realization and confidence in that there isn't just one path to get to where you want to go, and also listening to yourself to understand when you're not happy or when you're seeking something else. I think that, I don't know if I can, I can't specifically pinpoint a time, but being in a situation where you think you're on the right path and you think you're going to where you want to go, and taking a step back and realizing maybe this isn't it, and that's okay. and understanding that that's okay, and then having the confidence to move forward and make a change, and reaching out to certain people who you might not have reached out to 5 years ago, but then they're in your life now and you can go to them and sort of have a bit of mentorship there. That's certainly something that I've learned throughout my career and sort of veering in different areas in the marketing world.
I guess two things. In terms of like advice for my younger self, it would be don't read the comments.
That's advice for today.
No, but seriously, I mean, whether you're a journalist on the other side of a screen, or you're a bartender on the other side of a bar, or the general manager who has to wake up and read Yelp reviews from a busy weekend, you're always going to hear from your detractors, and less so from people who support you. And earlier, I kind of let myself kind of spiral downward whenever something like that happened, and I'm not alone. I looked at this study that said that it was a 2018 study that said they interviewed 75 female journalists, and 73 said they experienced gendered harassment online, or harassment that has to do with their gender. So there's like a lot of bad out there, so you just need to like keep telling yourself kind of to believe in yourself and cut out the noise. The second thing I wanted to say, I feel like I really messed up in not taking time and seeking out professional development opportunities. I was just kind of, once one deadline's passed, I'm on the next deadline, and while I'm one of the oldest people in my all-weekly newsroom, I'm actually among the least experienced in this exact kind of position. So I wish that I had made more time to go and learn more, because I have a lot to learn.
So my first one was, don't be upset with people that don't support you. You have to flip that for personal growth. I really, really wish my 20-year-old self would have known that. My second one was, it's okay to mess up because you always have the next day. I'm somebody, if I mess up on something, it ruins me. So now I'm just like, you can get up and start anew the next day. And my third, start yoga.
I would probably tell my younger self to talk less and listen more. And I think that probably because we feel that we have to use our voice so often, but that it's less about the information and more about making sure that you have a plan that's attached to the information that you have. So, yes.
And so kind of playing off of what Laura said, taking a step back and like specifically, I guess, for Kathy, I think you deal with a lot of different buckets, from like city planning to political to restaurant, like you're kind of on all different facets. And so taking a step back and like building your personal development and getting mentors, like did you have a mentor? Did you ask them to be your mentor? Did it just kind of naturally happen? Like how do you navigate that? Because it can sometimes be an awkward conversation. You might not really know what you're asking for. So, what's your suggestion of how to approach that, or how to make time for that, or how to build that into your day-to-day or week-to-week goals?
I definitely had mentors, and I was very intentional about finding them. There was one who I kind of had no choice, but she was phenomenal. I mean, she was who I wanted to be my mentor. I had a market mentor, and I had a business mentor. So I had Dr. Charlene Drew Jarvis was my mentor here on the city and policy and government. And there were a lot of uncomfortable moments. I had to go to her for advice, for growth, for mistakes made, corrections going forward. And there were many times that she disagreed with the direction I was going in, and I had to be okay with that. But she was very clear. This is what I think. You're still choosing to go in this direction, and you will live and learn from that. And I did. And I also had my business mentor who was on the private sector side when I was with Comcast for many, many years. Someone internally that helped me navigate the culture with a big company and various markets. And the best piece of advice that this gentleman gave me was when I was pregnant. And I was so worried. It was when we had Blackberries, if anyone remembers Blackberries. And I was literally going into the delivery room with my BlackBerry, trying to send my last final emails. And I was so worried about this notion that you will never sleep again because we will have this child and I'll never sleep again. And he said, you will sleep again, you just will never ever sleep the same. And that was probably the greatest advice I ever got in my life because it's very true. But you have to be intentional about finding your mentors. I think you have to know that if you ask, you have to show up because they will disappear. But if you are not going to take that relationship seriously, then I think it's on you. And I think it's very important. Again, my younger self did this, but going back, I probably would have showed up in very different ways with those mentors.
Well, I've been fortunate enough I still have my two. My first one was a young lady, Miss Barbara McClung. I pretty much based when I was doing front desk, rooms control at the hotel, my whole career I followed in her footsteps. She would tell me, she'd be like, no, don't you say that. No, don't you do that. And I'm like, okay. And you don't want to hear that because you're an adult, but she was like my mom. So I'm like, all right, fine. And then my second one is Lynn Jason. I'm sure if you work at a hotel or a restaurant, you know who she is. She recently retired. I can call her anytime, day or night to this day. She put her claws in me. I wasn't looking for a mentor at that time. I was still that scared concierge. And she sat me down one day. She was like, I'm going to mentor you. Do you know what that means? And I was like, no, but I'm scared. And she's just like, you need to listen to me. I will never steer you wrong. You have to trust me. And when someone tells you that, you really have to trust them. You have to open yourself up to that. They're the ones that are going to tell you something you might not want to hear about yourself, but you have to also understand it's coming from a place of love. If it's something that's coming off as malicious, you might want to sit down with that person and really figure out, why are they pinpointing me? Why are they looking to me? Even when you're looking for your own mentor yourself, please do it. Like, these people are out here. If there's someone you see that has the career path that you want, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation, inviting them out for coffee. This is needed, especially with women. I don't see that many out there. Any new concierge that joins our association, I'm on them. I'm showing up at your hotel and I'm like, hey, who are you? Where do you see yourself in 2 years? Some people, like my colleague now, she wants to be a librarian. I told her flat out, whatever you need, I will support you. And you don't hear that too much these days, and that's very sad, but it should be eye-opening for you as well. Why aren't there more women in this field? Like my field right now, it's very male-dominated, and that's not just in the U.S., that's all over the world. Like, they have an association, and they came to DC 2 years ago, and it was barely any women, and I was just like, wow, this is a thing. So we try to push, we try to say, you have to have your eye on that hotel front desk person, see if you see anything special about them, and then you can kind of cultivate that. And this doesn't just work for hotels. Even when I was in restaurants, I did the same thing. I'm like, have you thought about being a corporate trainer? And they're just like, no. And I was like, you should. I met a young man that works at a Trader Joe's at Easter Market, and I was just like, have you ever thought about working at a hotel? And he was like, no. I was like, you should. You just put those bugs out there. And it's just, I'm not just saying this for women, even though that's what I kind of gear myself towards. But if you see something special in somebody, you can say it. Like, my roommates, they're honestly the reason I got into hotels. They were like, once they said, we see you working at a hotel, I didn't know what that meant, but now I do, So it's an amazing thing to have.
Well, I think I just hired her as my mentor.
Tiffany just recruits all the time.
Very excited about it. Well, in journalism, every editor you have is basically a de facto mentor if they're doing their job the right way. And I guess the person I probably learned the most from was Jessica Sidman, who had this job before me. She taught me important things like chefs are not your friend. And we care about you, but I can't come over to your house for dinner, for example. So I took over, I pitch hit for her for 3 years as a freelancer and wrote for her, and she kind of shaped me. And then when she moved on to Washingtonian, I slid in, and I still remember things that she taught me. And even though we're competition, we're good friends, and I will always cheer for her.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. I do think that there is something to be said, though, about the word mentor, because in hardcore corporate America, it's very academic, and there's incredible mentorship programs. Hilton has an incredible mentorship program where our CEOs and leaders and VPs actually identify people in leadership roles and bring them up and have a very structured mentorship program, and those are fantastic. And I highly encourage anybody to do those. However, I also think that mentorship comes in everyday relationships too. And some of the greatest mentors I have just been either friends or people who I've been friendly with who I haven't seen as a mentor, but I've turned to them for leadership and guidance in a way that has helped me improve both personally and also in my career, for sure. And so identifying those people in your life, especially as someone who is looking to seek mentorship, I think is highly important. And to the other part of your question, Meaghan, in terms of starting those conversations, again, if you're in a corporate structure, that's easy. It's already built for you. But identifying maybe something that you need help with or a specific question and inviting someone to coffee, as you mentioned, and just sparking that conversation. And then most importantly, having the follow-up with that is huge. I think, you have to kind of take initiative, not show initiative, because I think that's implied as, doing something to get them to the next level, but taking actual initiative to have that follow-up and have that conversation and being self-sufficient and showing that person that you're sparking this relationship with, that you're listening to them and you're caring and you want to learn more and you're hungry for that. And anybody in that mentorship role or that relationship role is going to want to help you and help you succeed.
Yeah, so like reaching out and building on the relationships and identifying that, like don't wait for them to come to you, right? Like we have to own that and go out and manage them to make sure you're extracting the information. So something that I'm going to call you out, one of our co-owners, Dan, who's here today, always says he's like the constant student, and that kind of like sank with me because I think you always have stuff to learn. And if you find people in your life or your personal, professional, family, whoever, that you feel like you can learn from without even having the like, hey, will you be my mentor conversation? Like, just know that like they're a resource and they're hopefully on your team, and that you can set up time with them anytime and like continue to grow your personal skills, whether it's emotionally or professionally or however that relationship may fold out. But I think those are all excellent points. And so I know I work with a, pardon my French, badass team of women. Yeah, they're all back there. And I know many of you do too. And so what's some of the best practices or things that you've experienced or done or seen with other industry professionals that have helped kind of lift women up, create, pathways and ladders for women in this industry to continue to grow or open up doors and make sure that we're continuing that kind of like forward momentum? Because I think sometimes it can be really challenging to kind of like get over that hub, and frankly sometimes there can be a very competitive spirit, and so we talk about women empowering women, and sometimes there can be this competition that's not really spoken out loud, but it's there. So like, what have you experienced, and how do you kind of like break through that noise to just make it great?
So I will say that I think that I use this term a lot, and I heard it from another wonderful woman, but the idea that women who love women support women, and I think that it's so simple, but it's so important. So I know internally we try to do that just on our team, but I also, what I'm seeing and what I believe works very well is this idea, and you may have heard of the success scaffolding, where you're creating the environment around you. It's very personal. You create the space around you. You create your communities of people. You have your tribe that keeps you accountable. You have your friends who nurture your soul and are wonderful in terms of friendship. You have people who you admire, and you have people who you strive to be like. And I think that creating that environment around you, whether you are an industry, which is what we as an industry try to do, is we kind of do that success scaffolding to create the culture that we want. Dan was very deliberate about creating that culture for his company, and not suggesting he did success scaffolding, but the idea that he identified the tribes and squads around him I think that women have a great talent in doing that because we naturally like to have our tribes close, but to make sure that you are choosing people that are going to be supportive and that want you to win. We try to practice that on our team to create that environment for one another, but I think that we're seeing that the industry is trying to do that as well, to make sure that they and we all succeed.
Well, mine is very simple. I never look at anything less than a friendly competition, even if it's not. In my mind, if you're still going against me, I still have something to learn from you. I've always had, well, no, it's been 15 years in the making, trying to have that positive outlook, because it's easy to see someone and say, oh, well, I didn't get it because so-and-so. I don't like thinking that way. And it takes a long time to not think that way, but at the same time, you have to really see, like, you can learn something from any and everyone in this room. And they don't have to look out for your best interests, because in a few years, you can be going up for the same position. You can be going up for the same job, the same title. And even if you don't get it, I'm still going to situate myself to learn something from you, because you had some sort of edge over me. And in my mind, I'm like, I need to learn from you. You may not like me for some reason. Maybe I'm too positive for you, but I still want to learn something from you. So that's just a little thing I've carried with me for the past 15 years.
I think that every choice is an opportunity. So whether you're planning an event like this one and you're deciding who's going to be up on stage, I think matters. Getting women up there matters. In journalism, I have the rare gift of having complete editorial control. No one's telling me what to cover, and so if you go back through all my work, I don't think you'll see maybe just one profile of a man, a white man, and kind of the people I choose to really prop up are women and people of color, because I can. And that's not to say that the city isn't full of terrific men who support us and root for us and who are doing amazing work in the community. But if I have the opportunity to shift the spotlight from where it's been for so long, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I like that every choice is an opportunity. I think, it's there's a huge relationship component, right? Like, to your point, if you're facing a lot of competitiveness, which, not to be wishy-washy, but society does put us into that competitive role, reaching out, branching those divides, having those conversations with your colleagues, people who you're working with every day, who you feel that with and that friction with, 100%. I also think if you're in a managerial role, and this is not to say don't hire men, but hire women, hire women. Help bring those people into the fold and teach them. If you're in a role where you're looking to move up, look for companies that and organizations that do have a group of badass women. Like, I have to say, again, a shout out to Hilton, but our CMO and our head of global communications are two exceptional women. And they'll come to the hotel and they'll have a 20-minute conversation with me, just in the middle of their day. Now, these are high-level execs, or C-suite execs, and they're incredible. And that filters down to the entire company. Our general manager is a woman. Our head of HR is a woman. My entire department is 99% women. So being in those environments and helping each other and creating those relationships, I think, is hugely important, and important to the point of creating that culture and that environment that then boosts other people up as well.
I have a few more questions, but we are running close on time, so I want to make sure that I'm going to open up to questions for y'all right now, if anybody has any. Questions? Anybody? Nobody? I don't buy it. Yeah, see, there's a couple. I don't have
a question, I have a comment. I just want to commend you all. I'm sorry. Hi, guys. Imani Lawson, Simba Global, Key Account Manager for Black Line. Just talking about coffee, so this is our coffee.
Yes, girl.
But I do want to commend you all for taking the time. I think this is a huge turnout. I think this is a huge, big step in the initiative you guys are speaking about and bringing together women empowerment, building the confidence, and giving us all that voice. So I just want to give you all your kudos. Well, thank you for, and then bringing us all out, and then continue to be great. I'm really following you guys' leadership right now. I'm taking it all in, I'm soaking it in, and it's empowering me today. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you.
Are there mics? Or should I just be
loud.
Okay, I'm very loud.
You're good.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm with the National Restaurant Association of Oregon. Lord, you probably think I'm stalking you. I was at an event 2 weeks ago.
Want to be my mentor?
But to her point, this is really awesome, and I wanted to ask, we're a nonprofit based here in the city too, and I just wanted to ask how can we be better about, helping other women here locally, also across the country. We have a lot of programs that serve young people, particularly, and a lot of young women, a lot of young women who are maybe not in school, not working, some who are in high school and trying to get into the restaurant industry, a very wide gamut. And I just want to know how we can be better at kind of maybe hosting more events like this and getting more involved locally. And I'm feeling empowered right now, so I would love to have other young people feel the same way. And if there's any recommendations or things you guys would like to see me open here?
I definitely have ideas. I will say this, and this is specifically for restaurant industry. We are 96% independently owned and operated in this market. So we are small businesses. And any organization that can help and create a platform or guide to give resources or direct for resources, these are people who are very misunderstood. They think it's very glamorous running a restaurant and owning a restaurant and cooking in a restaurant, and it's not. I mean, very candidly, it's wonderful and adds to the fabric of what makes this city so vibrant and our region so vibrant, but what I hear over and over and over again is how difficult it is. So knowing the resources that are out there that can help a small business owner and operator is so important and should never be taken for granted in terms of, well, they may not need it or they may not want it. It's bring it on, and whether it's myself and my organization or other partners, whether it's the city paper, just to be able to know that those resources are out there. I would just welcome that, and I think that our restaurant owners and operators would as well.
If you see something I do, if you see a job, a good job, tweet it, share it, get the word out, tag all the the communities of color, I forget the acronym, but that help get more diverse people into workplaces. Yeah, if you see a good job, spread the word.
I would also just say, and then I'll come to you, I would say the DC restaurant community is very it's a pretty tight-knit crew, and I know our group has started to take on internships, and we're thinking about that next generation of people coming up into this world. We're thinking what's this going to look like 10 years down the road? Who are our next up-and-comers? And so I think we're certainly not alone in that boat, but I think a lot of groups, because we're privately owned and we kind of have, that gives us a lot of leeway with what we're capable of doing. And so I think we should chat. And but there's a lot of groups out there that are offering the industry's evolving, and so the business has to evolve, and the way you recruit and hire and train and scout talent evolves with that. And so, because we're not this huge corporate chain place, it also lets us do more creative things on a more personal level. So I think there's a lot that between this whole crew that we could collaborate on for sure.
Another thing I'll just mention, don't hesitate to reach out to the corporations in this area.
Yeah, I'm not hitting on Hilton, sorry.
And I'm not even talking about Hilton, of course, I'm sure Marriott, but I mean, the Capital Ones, Oracle, they all have community initiatives and they all have funding. So make those relationships, and they're dying for local people to come up and step up to the plate and help fund you. So have some connection.
Hi, I'm Lindsay in Moncrief. I'm a regional account manager with Social Tables in Seabend. I think when you go back to the mentor question, some of the best advice I received a couple years back from a chief people officer who was a woman at Social Tables, which was very, very exciting. She reminded me that oftentimes you hear the word mentor and you think you need a mentor, and I love that you brought up a business mentor and more of an industry mentor, but she brought up what you really need is an advocate. And oftentimes we look to mentors to advocate on our behalf or be that voice for us. And so how, as successful women yourselves, how have you navigated between finding a mentor and an advocate in a deliberate or non-deliberate way?
Yeah, I fully align to the advocate term as well, only because I have a bit of an allergy to the academic speak of mentor to the point that you're talking about. I think that they are in and of themselves obviously very similar. But the way that I've navigated that is really finding those more personal, like everyday relationships and learning from them in a mentorship capacity, but then also those people will then inherently go out and advocate on your behalf to whatever you're trying to do. So if you're trying to move up in your career and you have someone internal, as Kathy said, which is like navigating the corporate world, that's super important. They can speak on your behalf and support you, and that inherently comes from aligning yourself to that mentorship position of being the person who wants to learn from them, and then just again taking initiative and showing up and showing that you care and being there.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that I would definitely say that in my case it was one and the same. I mean, you are not forced to have that person as a mentor. It is deliberate, and you want them to be your champion, and they should be your champion throughout your career. It just may be that you have other people that you pull into your tribe as you evolve professionally.
And one thing still to this day with both of mine is they did advocate for me, but they also taught me how to advocate for myself. You know, they taught me how to write an email without emotion, speak without emotion. So that's something that a good mentor will teach you how to do.
Hi, my name's Jennifer. I'm a hotel concierge, and I'm very new into this industry. I've only been a hotel concierge for 2 years, and all of you have been doing the hospitality industry for many years. Is there any advice you would give to somebody who is still newer in this industry? And on the second question, as I continue to grow, is there any advice you would give me to help mentor people coming into this industry that I am?
I'll start this off. No, like, honestly, I know Jennifer. So for you, it's one thing that helped me, which put a lot of spotlight on me, is to learn to be quiet. I really had to sharpen my listening skills. Any and everyone can talk, but actually listening is a learned skill as well. And when I would go to these events and I would just sit amongst the older concierge that have been doing this, 30, 40 years now, and I would just sit there and listen. Like, I listened to them, I listened to tour guides. Actually, I found out, and Ms. Riss, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I literally was sitting there listening to a conversation, and this tour guide was like, I saw this young chef on the video cooking for Julia Childs, and she blushed, and I was like, no way. And so it's just like, you know, just by listening, you can learn so much. You don't necessarily have to input anything. Just learning to listen is just a great art form. And then, you know, asking questions. There's nothing wrong there. I always was taught there's no dumb question, even though sometimes I even question my own questions. I'm like, you know, but, you know, asking questions, learning to listen, that'll take you so far and you won't even realize it, because, you know, someone's always looking at you. They're just like, oh, who is that? I wonder what they're about. And, you know, don't be scared. That's another thing. You can be nervous or socially awkward. I am, but, you know, you just have to go do it half the time. You just have to go shake a hand, introduce yourself, learn to network, learn about associations that'll help you network with people who you want to network with. Our association's great for that. Every meeting we do 15 minutes of networking before and after. Well, the after is more longer, but you know, you have to be a go-getter in our industry as well. You know, restaurants don't come to us all the time. You have to go to these restaurants. You're your own motivation and your own success. And again, I don't like the word no. So if you're telling me no, and I'm gonna keep saying it, You have to tell me why. My answer is no.
Yeah, I was going to say ask questions. I think you have a huge advantage of being new because you have all of the things in the world to learn. Like when I came back to the hospitality industry, that's all I did. There's a lot of acronyms that I didn't know. And so every single one, I was like, oh, what does that mean? Okay, got it. And then take that in and then use it again. But associations, networking, all of those things, that's a huge advantage. And then as a mentor, bring people to them, or bring people with you to them.
I would say two things. One is, if you see something that you are interested in professionally, be your own advocate and say, I'm interested and I'd like to be considered, period. Just say it. And I think that oftentimes we're not as bold to do that, just to ask to be considered. So in terms of your own professional development, but then in terms of mentoring others or pulling other people in, I do think many of you have said this morning, the idea of identifying talent. If you see someone who is very talented in a very specific way, identify them and also help create a platform for them if you are in a position to do it.
Hi, my name is Nev. Currently multi-unit account manager with Foodpro. It's an independent broadliner in Frederick, but for many years I worked with farmers. And I have a question and a little bit of a comment. I wanted to say that this is probably one of the best companies in our area that supports women. The best managers in the world having women farming farmers. I don't know how many male managers we have, but there are some. But the bestest of women at work here. Now, the other thing that Founding Farmers does is that they support women in being in these positions, but at the same time, we are allowed here to be ourselves, to be women, to have emotions, to have the nurturing side that women have, to be able to connect with, our staff and everyone that works here. What I wanted to ask the panel is, when you become a little bit more, and I've had the experience of being in other companies that don't support women, and that's not, I won't say being too emotional, but they look down on it. They view our nurturing people as weakness, our emotions as weakness, and I believe that it's not weakness. It's what makes us different in the hospitality, what gives us the advantage of being really good at our jobs. So have you ever been, subject to any of this, where your emotion or your instinct at a moment has been, looked down on, and how do you overcome it?
I kind of feel like you were asking me, but I think your eyes were just there. I'm not volunteering to answer that yet. I'm just observing them.
There's no crying in newsrooms thing is said all the time. And does anyone know what Slack is? So I think that there's a Slack channel that I'm not invited to that is called Is Laura Crying? It's like this is something that I struggle with, but I also hope is a little bit of a strength. I joke sometimes that half of my job is sitting in coffee shops and crying with strangers because I do a lot of emotional interviews. But I have had a female boss, not currently. My two female bosses now are very supportive, but I have had one that, roasted me on that and told me to get it together. And it was like my first year in this very challenging job, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard. 'Cause I'm not the type to go sit in the bathroom stall and cry. I think what really helps is having female coworkers that you can talk to, and male coworkers too, if they're a game. But yeah, I agree with you that I hope that it's considered a strength. I've matured a little bit. I've kind of gotten my shit together, but that's a real concern for sure.
Well, and so as you know, my goal is not to talk about today. I think I've done pretty good at that. So we have when you're going out to a job, I always like to remind candidates, you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. So know who you're signing up for, right? Hospitality industry is long hours, it's hard work, and you want and you should love what you do every single day. It's important. And we have the saying, within our four walls. Like, everything matters, everything's personal, you're human. There's no such thing as like leaving your problems at the door and like this is your work life and that's your personal life, and what's going on in your personal life doesn't affect your work life. Like, it does. If you have stuff going on in your personal life, it affects your work life. And I think you want to make sure that you're with a company that like recognizes that and supports your life, not just your career, like supports you as a person. And so like keep that in mind when you're looking at companies. It's really easy to get caught up in like the bells and whistles, but like be conscious about whether you're currently with a job or you're questioning or you're interviewing with jobs, like who's like the person you're working for, what's the culture of that company, and how are they really going to support you outside of just your career, right? So like I would just say be mindful of that. And I think the fact that we're able to be so empathetic and helps our hospitality through and through. And I think one of the biggest challenges is there is a professional way to communicate your emotions without being emotional, and it's a hard line to gauge, and it takes practice, and the only way to get practice is to have those conversations. And they can be scary, they can be uncomfortable, and it can be awkward, and all of the things. I've had many of them, and I'm still working on it, and I will probably continue to work on it for the next 30 years. So like, I just encourage you to like, be brave, have the courage. Hopefully you work somewhere where you know you can go and like have that conversation and be in a safe space, and they're going to support you and really coach you and grow you to continue to be able to have that conversation better. But if you're at a place that's not supporting you, just working through your own personal growth, then that might be a different conversation. But that's my 2 cents on the topic.
And I would say in that situation, if you feel stuck or you're with a company or an organization where you do not feel supported, then figure out who outside of the organization can give you some of the tools to navigate that space. Because for me, 25 years ago, look, it wasn't easy. I was usually the only woman in the room, but I found the tools I needed to figure out what I needed to do. Today, I don't think there's any excuse for women to ask if you're in a position to say, what do you do as company X to support women? What are some of the initiatives that you have in this company? It's very fair, and I think it's actually only appropriate to ask that. But I know that people aren't always in a position to leave where they are if they're not feeling supportive, but you can create your network to at least get the tools to help you deal with it until you can get the hell out of there.
And that's a good reminder, like advocates and mentors aren't just within the company you're currently at. Like, branch out, use your network, use your friends, go to events. Like, it takes effort. It takes conscious effort to like build that network for yourself, and then, but I think it can take you really far. Any other questions? Then we're gonna wrap up after you.
Hi, my name's Emily Vecchioni. I'm with Destination DC. How, kind of piggybacking off of that last topic, how do we do better at educating some of our male allies that maybe like say that they walk the walk or talk the talk and say that they're on our side and that they support women, but then, you know, we do have the interrupting or we have the streamlining ideas or whatever, and how do we kind of, or steamrolling, how do we kind of educate them and help them become better allies to us so that we can be our best selves?
I'll take this one. I've worked in some seriously male-dominated industries. Obviously, finance, the startup world is very male-dominated, and a lot of times they just don't have time for us, or they don't have time for the crying. And I think that and let's be honest, like every woman I know has been like, oh, do you remember that first cry that you had at this job? And that first cry you had. I mean, it's like, look, but I heard something recently that I think is really empowering, which is women don't cry because we're sad, we cry because we're frustrated. And explaining that to someone is like eye-opening. And so my take would be, don't be afraid to have the conversation. And they might not listen to you, but pull people aside one-on-one instead of like, hey, I'm gonna address this entire group of men who don't even care that I'm here right now. Find an advocate as a man. I mean, like, listen, we're all women and we're in this industry, but we also have male advocates, obviously. Like, look at Dan Simons, who's created this incredible culture. Find those people, talk to them one-on-one and explain, like, I wasn't upset because of X, Y, and Z. I was upset because of this. And we should know that. and I want you to understand where I'm coming from, and then allow that to permeate throughout the rest of the organization, if you can. And that's a hard conversation. It's not for everyone, but like sometimes you gotta just grab the bulls by the horn and like go into it. But and then I think at the same point, also accept that not everyone's gonna care, and not everyone's going to feel your pain, and that's okay. And those people can be put over here, and you can deal with them separately, or like address those people in a way that makes sense for them. But because we are empathetic people, we can understand the way in which people see the world and go out and see a purview, and finding the people who have the similar empathy, going and making relationships with them will help you and will help them advocate for you across your organization.
I've yet to have knock on wood, to have a bad experience doing this, but like some folks that I work with, or whether it's vendors or partners or whatever, will like interrupting is like the key one, and oftentimes, so I'll pull them aside after the meeting, like pulling somebody up in front of people, it's just not productive in my experience. But I'll pull them out there and just like a quick note, hey, I don't know if you realize you did this, but you actually like kept interrupting me. It was really frustrating. And it doesn't have to be it's not like a big confrontation, it's a conversation. It is not like, sometimes I tend to build things up bigger than I had than they need to be. And so just like making them aware, and 9 times out of 10 the reaction was like, really? Like, give them the benefit of the doubt, first of all, that they probably or maybe don't even know that they're doing it, and help teach them, coach them in the moment though. Don't let it sit and fester and like, hey, remember last week? They're not gonna remember last week. Like, you gotta do it right after the meeting, when it's fresh, when it's in the moment, so you're proactive, you're holding them accountable, and then ideally you're coaching them and training them through it, instead of just like letting it fester and being like, ugh, Joe over there, God, he's really the worst. Like, that's not gonna help anybody, it's not gonna help him, it's not gonna help you for the future. So I would say do it as frequently as you can in the moment, in private, and build that relationship and build that awareness so you can have a healthy working relationship.
It's like the difference between talking to a manager during a meal that's going awry and yelping later.
Well said. Yes. Please talk to the manager around duty.
Shout out to Dan Simons for that one.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna wrap up. We have a few more minutes, and we have some more food that we would love for you to eat. Coffee, beverages, food. We're all gonna be around if you want to come up and ask any questions one-on-one. But thank you so much for coming. We hope to do more of these. You guys have been fabulous, and thank you so much to our fabulous panelists for joining us.